So my homage to Bill is I have my smoothie, which is today we have fresh squeezed orange juice, pineapples that we mixed in, a little coconut for the island flavor, because being from parts unknown, you might be on an island somewhere.
Absolutely.
And we threw in some coconut and some what are those black little seeds, chia seeds.
Yeah. Okay.
We threw in some of those in the smoothie for today. So
yeah, you gotta get some protein powder in there. That's the only thing you're missing.
And it is perfect. There's my homage to Bill Hartman.
Very nice. Very nice.
Forgot my straw though.
The straw is huge because you got to do when he sips the straw and goes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. Anyway, we got Zac Cupples on. Great. I'm sure you all have heard of him, but if you haven't, great physical therapist, once again, from parts unknown. Today, we don't know exactly where he is. I don't know if he knows where he is.
I'm somewhere. I'm always somewhere.
Always somewhere. That's true.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why don't you promo your matrix things, courses that I want to go to that I haven't been yet, but I hear they're really cool.
Well, so. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, name's Zac Cupples. I'm a physical therapist, strength coach, and I wear two hats. The first hat that I wear is I run zaccupples.com, which is the goal of that website, like the goal of this activity, is to try to take all the complex topics that we have in the health and performance field and try to simplify them as much as possible so it's much easier to apply, because I think that's probably the biggest barrier is it takes time. It takes a lot of energy and discipline to really dive into these topics and learn. We still have people to help in the meantime. So if we can get people applying these concepts and in a successful manner, then I think everyone benefits. So I do that, and I do also teach seminars that builds upon that, called Human Matrix, where we work on a lot of the practical applications of some of the concepts that we discuss in this field at this point, day and age. And the other thing that I do is I work at Elevate Sports Performance and Healthcare in wonderful Las Vegas, Nevada, where I'm a physical therapist, strength coach, nutrition from time to time, and the education director. And that's about my life right now.
And all around good guy and smart human being.
It's just because I know good people like yourself, Rufus.
yeah, I contribute a lot to your education, don't I? I go to breakfast with you.
And we have the same barber, so we got that going too.
That's true. As a matter of fact, I went to him, saw him this morning. He says hello, by the way. Nice. And so we'll get going here. And I know Corey's been chomping at the bit for this. So
can't wait.
He also asked great questions. So I'm gonna, as usual, turn it over to him, and maybe I'll chime in if I can understand what the heck you guys are talking about. So actually, with you really simplified some things for me. And I was up at 4:00 this morning watching a couple of your videos. So
nice. Well, I'm
on an entirely different subject. So
what were you watching?
I was watching the split squat one, but also the fake throw where you sit on the box. I forget what you call it. And
the fake lift.
Yeah, fake lift. Yeah.
I've been loving those lately for people.
Really? Who do you give those
to? So if I give it to someone who has a hard time changing levels in a cut, as an example. It's almost like that extra speed helps get them down into that position. So anytime someone can't get that level change in whatever position, that's when I'll utilize some of the chops. And then if I need them to maintain the position, then I go into the lift. So the lift is kind of like, you're going to try to stay low, and then you got this fast force that's trying to kick you out of that, and you want to try to stay in there. So if I got someone who just can't descend into a position, fake it till you make it, baby.
So it'd be like a golfer or a baseball, hitting in baseball.
Yeah. Yeah, especially where I work at Elevate, we have tons of golfers, and a lot of times just they have that inability to either get as far back as they can in the backswing. So what they end up doing is they end up arching their back. And so anything I can do to get them to get a non-compensatory rotation back there has been useful. And the cool thing about golfers is, I think in this field, we're always uncertain to what extent does all this matter and transfer to sport. Because, we do something, we do something really cool on the table, and it's like, oh, great. Did you see how much shoulder motion you got? Well, who gives a shit, right? But if there's one sport where it's made me a believer that this does transfer, it's golf. Because what we'll see, especially my colleague and one of my bosses, Brian Chandler, he works with a ton of golfers, is he'll do interventions, some of the stuff that I teach and stuff that Bill uses, and we'll get changes in club head speed instantaneously. And so it's a really nice, it's like you still get that instant gratification that you might get from the table test, but it's much more meaningful to the individual. And it's simple to measure because you can throw a K vest on them, or you can utilize technology to measure how fast they're hitting or the directions that they're hitting, and you get really good feedback.
Do you have all the gadgets there to measure that right away?
We utilize a K vest. That's the one thing that we have right now to measure some of that stuff, which basically what that is it's a vest that you have the athlete wear, and it measures any angle changes within their swing, and it can measure how fast they go through the motion. Wow. But a lot of the funny thing is with a lot of these amateur golfers, or even some of the pros that we have, they're willing to spend a gazillion dollars to just get like that much extra. And so a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go elsewhere and measure stuff. And that's when they notice the changes. It's like, oh, wow, yeah, this is way different. Or we have objective data to determine this.
So do you think I don't know much about golf. I just got interested in it because I got a really nice little kid that's a golfer. She's a good athlete, was a level 7 or 8 or 9 gymnast till she broke her neck. And yeah, and now she plays golf. So, so I just kind of got interested in golf, trying to help her out and stuff. And really good athlete, and gives great feedback. And so I've kind of noticed. Corey and I were just talking about. She seems to shove her hip forward, her left hip on the backswing. She's right-handed. Shoves it forward. Shoves her hip forward, and which allows her to kind of get that rotation. But I guess my question is, so if you can get the rotation properly, it would seem like that would save a lot of golfers' backs that have back problems and things like that. Is it on the right
path?
Path?
Absolutely. So when you see that and they have to shove that hip forward so much, they're trying to compensate for the rotation that they can't get into in the backswing. And a lot of times what you'll see, and I'll preface this, I'm still learning a bit about the swing. But usually the right leg, you'll see the foot come up instead of being plastered to the ground. And so in that situation, what that individual is doing is they're trying to open up the hips as much as they can to get to the backswing. But then the issue is it's going to be significantly harder to load and follow through on the front leg, in this case, the left. And so they end up having to open up somewhere. The other thing that you'll oftentimes see is when that person hits the backswing, they'll either just try to use arms only, or they'll create this crazy arch in their back as well. Both of them limit the full excursion that you ought to be able to attain in the backswing. And so then potentially that puts more load in the back. I've seen it also too, where we've had issues, shoulders, elbows. It's just like the areas that get overloaded are the areas that often try to make up for the deficit in creating the total rotation we need at the pelvis, at the hips, and at the thorax. So yeah, that's very common. And so a lot of times what you'd need to do in that situation is figure out why that person has the deficit to rotate into the backswing, and then you would select drills to improve upon that.
Very good. Thank you. That answers my question. Corey.
There we have it.
Corey, you're sitting there going, shut up, Rufus.
Well, no, it's cool because just going off that, because like Rufus will send me videos of some of his kids and he'll use a golf swing or like a baseball swing as the test retest. So
Absolutely.
we'll see like even just from like doing something in like half kneeling or just a well-coached split squat, you'll actually see the mechanical changes in the swing without having to coach anything in the swing or tell them to do anything different.
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't have to go to a table or anything to confirm your change. You use that as your test retest because it's looking at the same things. It's just with dynamic movements, especially something like golf. There's just a lot more things that your eye has to catch. So the tests on the table just minimize the constraints there, or they maximize the constraints, I should say. So you have a bit more accuracy. But if you can get the eye for what you need to see in a swing, or the nice thing is if you film something, you can always go slow motion. You can see the changes manifest pretty quickly in a lot of individuals.
Well, so how do you feel like, so I guess I'm assuming you're just getting into more of this golf stuff. How do you feel like having a good just movement model in your head has helped you transition to work with more of your golfers or rotational athletes in terms of understanding what's going on in a swing and how to address these biomechanical column faults, difficulties, whatever?
It's the nice thing about the model that I use and the concepts that I've learned from Bill is if you understand what type of movements should happen as we move as human beings, whether it's a squat, whether it's walking, whether it's anything, it allows you to look at movements that you might not be normally accustomed to seeing. So like Rufus, you'll love this. I've been working with a guy on the mentorship side. And we're looking at a lot of Olympic lifting right now, and just seeing what compensatory activities are going. And I don't have much experience with Olympic lifting, but I can still apply the concepts from the model that I operate from within that specific framework. And it allows me to see the same patterns. The thing that I miss is with some of this stuff, and I getting better with golf because I have really good people at Elevate who can guide me in that sense is, well, what should we see in this particular thing? Because I have a conception of what on a basic constituents of biomechanics we should see, but what's the ideal from a golf perspective? And so it just allows me to better tackle problems that I might not have much experience in at a technical level, but I can still apply the same model. And a lot of times the cool thing's been that they still need the same things that maybe someone who we don't go to that specific of a sport need. It's like, you still gotta be able to rotate. You still gotta be able to get the stack position that I talk about. And you still have to be able to put your body into positions that you need to demonstrate full movement capabilities.
That's cool. Not to get off on a tangent on this, but what are you, I know, Corey, what are you seeing in the weightlifters?
Oh, God, so many things. But actually, well, the most common thing, which is a very common compensatory strategy, is when people get out of the bottom of whether it's a snatch or a clean and jerk, is you see that right knee just go so far into internal rotation, way more so than the left. And it's just fascinating to see all the different, it's not like I see so many iterations of that. And so, and I've noticed a lot of it depends on what type of setup or stance that person assumes to get out of the bottom of those lifts. So if someone keeps their feet fixed and they're in a straight line, as opposed to opening up, because a lot of times I'll see left foot will be further ahead than the right. If I see the feet roughly about the same level, that's when I start to see that right knee just cave in like gangbusters. And to me, if we look at the common compensatory strategy, or as Bill would say, the oblique axis of the pelvis, a lot of those are compensatory strategies that we see that people are trying to manage as they're as they're moving these big weights. Those would be some of the biggest things that I see that are pretty interesting.
Have you looked at Niam Suleimanalu, the Pocket Hercules? Have you seen any video on him?
No, we've seen we've actually looked at a lot of female Olympic lifters in China, because this guy who I work with is big into Chinese weightlifting. We've definitely looked at Liu Xiaojing.
Yeah.
If I pronounce his name well. But no, Pocket Hercules, was he like 90s?
Yeah, he was in the.
I remember him.
Yeah, he was like 4'11", 4'10".
An absolute monster.
Oh yeah, and at one time there was like 5 guys that had triple body weight clean jerked, and he was like 3 of them. And if it's really interesting, because when he stands up out of the clean, his I can't remember if his knee necessarily comes in, but his whole weight shifts to the left. You can see his hip. It just goes like this, and which is pretty interesting. And I just wondered what you thought about that, and I think that grew over the years, because I think I've seen like his first Olympics in '88. I don't think he does it quite as much, but towards the end, like in '96 and 2000, I mean, it was really a shift. And
was he moving bigger weights at that time as well?
No, about the same amount of weights.
Interesting. Yeah, I just wonder if maybe he
I don't know if he got hurt sometime, or
it could be that, or just the older we get, the harder it is to create movement changes. We just have less adaptability, and I think a lot of that, at least this is my theory, is as we get older we lose water. So that if you look at, there's this cool study that I looked at where they measured water content of cadavers of various ages, and the amount of water that I believe we're made of was like 90% on the high end, but then it was like 50% on the low end. And the difference is as you age, you have less water, and water is the adaptable piece that we can change our bodies with and move. So I wonder if that's a contributing factor to when you see older individuals are generally stiffer.
Have you developed a model of what the clean and jerk, or the jerk and the snatch should look like? I mean, in your head?
No.
So, okay, go ahead.
Well, my thought would be a very basic, rudimentary understanding, and I always use the bouncy ball analogy. So if I want to get a bouncy ball to go as high as it can in the air, I want to throw it straight down as opposed to bouncing it off a side wall. Right. So my thought would be, if I want to throw a barbell up in the air as high as I can, which is kind of what you're doing with Olympic lifting, you'd want to see similar displacement of the body in that sense. But I also know that there's different phases of the lift where you might be hinging in a certain aspect, but I would think at least out of the bottom of both of those, you'd want it to be more squat-like, or you'd see vertical displacement of the pelvis. But I would defer to you, Rufus, in that sense as well.
That's all. I was just curious about that. So go ahead, Corey. Sorry.
No, let's keep rolling with this, because it kind of also plays into some of the stuff I wanted to talk about. I'm thinking, so let's keep with the Olympic weightlifting idea here. So in terms of, everyone's going to have some type of differences in their physical structure. So, I mean, Rufus, feel free to chime in here too. How would you feel like those differences are going to play into how well someone's going to be able to execute like a clean and jerk or a snatch? And like, if you're just going to see deviations in form based on how they're structured?
Yeah, I definitely think that plays a role. So for example, if we look at like someone like Lou, or perhaps even Pocket Hercules, people who have narrower frameworks, they're going to have a significantly easier time staying vertical within a squat. And that's why they can get so frickin', I mean, it's almost like they're upright at the bottom of their lifts, versus someone who perhaps is in the heavyweight division where you have a wider framework. Just based on the anatomical constraints of that, it's going to be significantly harder to keep in that vertical position. So you might see a different path on the way up. I would still think that just from an efficiency standpoint, again, I'll use the bouncy ball analogy. You want to try and be as best of a downward bouncy ball as you can to go upright. But I think the degree of success that someone's going to have with that is definitely dependent on that person's structure. So that would be my initial thoughts with that.
So, and so when you do a jerk, basically it's a dip and a drive, right? And so
Yeah.
you taught to when you go down into the dip, or we call it a jump phase if you don't know what we're talking about, the knees go out instead of forward. You want the knees going out, because if you push them forward, the barbell will project forward. Okay, so the knees kind of keep the barbell from projecting upwards forward, and so that's kind of your bouncy ball analogy in that case. And so if I'm in a jerk, and I don't know how many you've seen or what, but you see a lot of guys where they're very front foot heavy, the chest is coming forward, and they have I can't think of the term. They have an arch back. Okay, so it's very much like this. And so I always try to teach my lifters to, it's more towards the split squat length, where you want the hip, knee, and shoulder all in alignment, because I feel that that's the strongest position to hold the weight. Okay, now, I know because of individual differences and things like that, the one leg, the back leg may be back a little bit farther to get a better balance, and that's fine. I don't mind that, but I want more of the shoulder and hip to be in alignment with the barbell overhead. Okay, so I can't remember if this was Bill or somebody asked me the other day, why do weightlifters push their head through? Have you ever noticed that? Have you noticed
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. So my thought is because they're trying to get the barbell, they don't have the shoulder mobility to get the barbell behind the ears without pushing themselves forward. Okay, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So in a fundamental movement level, if I see someone with more of a forward head posture, that usually is associated with an internal rotation deficit at the shoulder. So the sequence of events at which I tell people that happens is, if you could envision someone walks into your gym or your clinic and they've just been on a World of Warcraft or Fortnite bender, 36 hours, 3 Mountain Dews, and they got the slumped shoulders and the head's way forward, right? All right, so we know this person. So in that situation, the scapulae are going to round forward into internal rotation. But in order for you to use your arms, you have to externally rotate them to bring them up to upright positioning. And when you have that change into ER, there's a concomitant loss of internal rotation. So in the snatch, because you got to pull the scaps back, you got to drive the elbows downward, there has to be internal rotation occurring at the humerus in order to get in that position. So if for whatever reason that person can't do that, they might, as a compensatory strategy, push their head forward and depress the sternum to help drive internal rotation. And maybe it's not a compensatory strategy. I don't know. It might be a useful adaptation to get that happen, but that would be my thought as to why they do that.
Interesting. I see it, and I try to coach my kids out and give them stuff, where they don't necessarily have to do that. But you see a lot of times weightlifters will press, or the push press, and even the jerk, where, you know, it's really noticeable. I can't remember if Corey asked me that the other day, or Bill or somebody, we were talking about it, and just kind of curious on your thoughts on it, since you are looking
Well,
at weightlifters.
yeah. So my thought would be a push press could potentially be useful in fixing that, because if that's what you're programming. So if you're coaching them where you have the thorax, abdomen, and pelvis and the head all stacked atop one another as they're performing that action, well, then what's going to happen is I'm not going to depress myself down and get into the World of Warcraft situation.
Right.
And so as I go overhead into that position, I have to be able to fill air into the front of the chest, which is going to increase the what we will call the pump handle action of the rib cage. It's going to restore dynamic capabilities there and potentially increase that person's available internal rotation. So that could potentially be a useful strategy for them.
And so, how, in order to correct that, then what would you do to correct that?
Well, it depends on. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I know there's a lot of things, and depends on a lot of things, but you know, just some strategies, what you're looking at doing, and things like that.
Yeah. So you'd have to find some type of strategy where that person could effectively drive air into the front of their chest just to help keep it upright without arching the back as a compensatory strategy. So again, it does depend on the individual, but generally, if you drive reaches of any kind while maintaining a good position at about 60 to 120 degrees of shoulder flexion, or anything that involves rotation where I'm reaching forward, all of those strategies can be useful at increasing the ability to put air in the front of the chest. So on a low level, that could be some type of quadruped breathing activity, could be hanging from a bar, because that kind of puts your arms in a similar situation. If we're talking more training, it could be doing alternating pressing of any kind, which could be with a cable, as long as you're allowing the scapula to move, as opposed to like a locking in place bench press. Those would be the types of strategies that I would consider for that. Another thing could be rowing, actually, because when I row, I'm pulling the scapula back. And then when I breathe in that position, that's going to force air to go forward into the front of the chest to help keep that upright. And then you'd want to choose at the high end activities that would reinforce that on a technical standpoint. So that could be a push press, that could be trying to maintain a similar position within reason. And those would be some of the areas that I would think it's generally a safe bet if you, especially if you get someone who's super stiff, to do things unilaterally, where I'm driving that rotational action. That seems to be what I've seen to be most helpful for those individuals who have that. I don't work with a lot of Olympic lifters, but where I do see that is overhead pressing, push pressing, even squatting to some extent. Some people will do that positioning, or even push-ups. But the fix is still the same. So you got to figure out how to get air in the front of the chest.
Yeah.
Zach, can you explain the difference between a reach and a press, and how it's going to influence where you're getting air into, like front of the chest, back of the body?
Yeah. So when I say a reach involves allowing the scapula to move and swivel along the rib cage. And when, depending on what direction you reach, that's going to influence where air is going. So, and again, we'll give credit to Daddy-O Pops for this. But if you do a low reach, Daddy-O Pops, Bill Hartman, if you don't know who that is. Low reaches are going to allow more air to go backwards. And this has to do with the relationship of the scapula and humerus as I perform the overhead action, which would be scapulo-humeral rhythm. Mid-zone reaches are going to drive more air in the front side of the chest. And then as I get up overhead, we get a reversal, and we have air again going more posteriorly. We don't talk about it much, but if I'm driving humeral extension, so arms going behind me, that's also another way to encourage air going into the front of the chest. And so you can utilize those different strategies to drive air into a specific area. Now, the difference between that and a press is with a press, the scapula is more fixed. So if I'm thinking of a bench press, generally, like why do you create an arch and you pin the scaps down on the bench? Well, it does a couple different things. One, it gives you a stable platform to move heavy weight from, which can be useful for a variety of reasons. Maybe you're a power lifter and you got to move maximal weight, and that reduces the bar path. Could also be useful for hypertrophy. The other thing that does is when I tip my thorax back into that position, it essentially tips the thorax more posteriorly, and that can free up shoulder range of motion to reduce the stress load on the shoulders for someone who's a bit more restricted. So it's the same reason why a power lifter might assume a very wide stance in a given lift, because it minimizes the amount of motion that they have to utilize in a given position. And because those individuals may have increased stiffness because of the nature of their sport, although there's likely genetic factors at play as well, it allows that person to still go through the degree of movement excursion that they need to complete the lift. And so utilizing an arch can be a useful adaptation for that.
So going off that, how would you categorize something like an alternating press? Because you're still doing the pressing motion, but you're moving one side relative to the other. So you're still kind of driving some rotation. So where does that kind of fit in terms of your progressions, or more like biasing, like relative motion versus chasing load?
So with an alternating press, the question would be, are you keeping the scapula fixed or are you allowing it to move? If you're keeping the scapula fixed, it's going to allow for more motion than a barbell bench press, but it might not be the best way to preserve movement options either, because in both of those situations, if I'm pinning the scaps on the bench, there's going to be a bigger arch in the back. The lower rib cage is going to be flared outward. And that's really the key area that I need to focus on to drive air into the uppermost parts of the thorax, which is going to increase available movement. Because if the lower rib cage is in that arched position, generally the diaphragm is in more of a descended orientation. And so then when that individual takes a breath of air in, most of the fill in the lungs, now it's going to fill the whole place, but you're going to have a greater bias towards the lower aspects. And as a consequence, if I'm expanding too much down low, it's going to squeeze up higher, limiting motion. So if the scaps are still fixed, you're going to restrict movement in a sense. And that can be useful depending on what your goal is. If you are allowing the scaps to move on this press, and you're accounting for lower rib cage position in a manner that allows you to get fill into the front of the lungs and the back, that could potentially increase movement much greater than if you even did bilateral, where you're getting both scaps to move simultaneously. And the reason why that is because when I rotate, I have to create a gradient of airflow and movement in order to allow rotation to occur. So those can potentially allow for greater excursions of movement to occur. It's just like if I reach both my arms forward, my thorax doesn't move much. But as soon as I start reaching a little bit further with my left hand, I get way more movement happening in that area. So rotation can be really useful for increasing available movement. And that's why when I'm working with someone on the training side, especially if they're dealing with pain or they're just getting back into training, most of the activities in the upper body are going to be unilateral for that very reason. In my last seminar, I was telling the attendees that rotation's a bit of a cheat code in a way to increase movement, just because you can get expansion and increases in range of motion in a wide variety of areas just by doing that, assuming that you're keeping a stacked positioning as you do so.
I love that, because it allows you to, one, just bias your exercise selection to kind of drive the changes you want. And then depending on how you coach it, you can get certain either developments in strength, force production, or just get more range of motion back. And so going off that, how do you kind of bridge the gap from you have someone in like the early stages of rehab to I need to get them back like on the training floor because they have certain goals they want to achieve? So I guess how do you build context in the beginning of your rehab process to make the transition back to lifting, doing whatever they want to do a little bit easier?
It depends on how much control I have over the situation. So at Elevate, we are lucky enough that I have the rehab side on one side of the office, and then the other side we have a full gym. And we have good communication with the trainers on that side. And so a lot of times, if I have someone who's rehabbing and they're spending a fair amount of time seeing me, we have them training simultaneously as part of their process. And we might load certain areas more so than others in the beginning, depending on what we're looking at. But what I try to do is, based on whatever they need from a movement perspective, I want to try to create an environment where they're demonstrating that specific action in as many different scenarios as possible. So I have someone right now, for example, who we're working with, she's a basketball player and has had several knee surgeries on both knees, doesn't have much ability to bend the knees. And in terms of range of motion that she needed, we needed to be able to get her hips to go underneath her a bit more, because anytime she would jump straight down, she'd have this large arch in her back forming, pelvis would tilt anteriorly. And then what would end up happening is, instead of the bouncy ball analogy where she's going straight down, straight up, she'd shoot her hips way back, get knee pain on the jumps, and then problems would ensue. And so on the PT side of things we would focus on would be low-level drills to be able to get her to go the opposite direction. So because she was pretty restricted on multiple directions, we did single-sided activities to try and drive that particular position, the tuck and the exhale, what I like to call the stack. And then as a part of our programming, we chose drills or loaded activities that would demonstrate that same concept. So that might be supported squat iso holds. In fact, that's what it was. That would be supported step ups, which would be the same thing. So you increase constraints in the beginning that still allow you to drive load, but maintain positioning. And if there's one thing that I've focused on a lot more this year, it's how can I get that person to express intensity throughout the rehab process? Because I think if you don't do that, and I got to give credit to Boo Schexnayder for this, because when I listened to his podcast, it really made me think about that. But if it's very easy for someone to detrain intensity very quickly if you don't provide them to some extent, especially if there's someone who has to produce a fair amount of intensity for their terminal task, in this case, basketball. So for her, we found drills where she was able to produce intensity but maintain the positions that we wanted. So a lot of that in the beginning was we did seated box jumps. So I had her sit pretty high up where she has to start from a vertical pelvic position, jump up to a box. So we minimize the eccentric stress that has to happen as a part of the landing. And then eventually that transitioned into doing that for bounds, doing that for hops, doing sled pushes. So we could simulate the sprinting activity where she's got to produce a large amount of force, but she might not be moving at high speeds. And so you just have to think, it goes kind of back to what we were talking about in the beginning with golf and Olympic lifting. Movement, the movements still have to happen. It's just you have to find the levels that that person can express the desired movements at and exploit them as much as you can. And if you do that, you're going to increase movement options, but then you're also going to promote the physiological adaptations needed for that person to express that at a higher intensity. And now to look at, okay, we have these qualities demonstrated here, and she's progressed quite a bit to where now we're doing more unsupported activities. She's doing repeat bounding and plyometrics, maintaining the same positioning. Where I think the real key is, the major key, as DJ Khaled might say, is how do we now demonstrate this on the basketball court? And so if we're looking at bounding or hops as an example, I'm having her with her finishes doing Euro steps, which is essentially a bound in multiple directions. And then she's doing layups or goofy foot finishes, where if you're not familiar with what that is, normally when you do a layup, if I did a left-handed layup, I'd jump off my right. Goofy foot would be a layup jumping off the left, as a way to demonstrate that movement skill in a way that's relevant to the task at hand. And that's really how you stoke the process. And then, so the progression from that is, okay, you can demonstrate that in the basketball court at low speed without any defenders. Then we ramp up speed. Then we do that in a controlled drill with defenders at play. Then we do that in scrimmage. Then we do that in game. And to me, that's the way that you build up these movement qualities, so they're manifested where they need to be.
I think this along those lines. So you say we need her to get her hips more under her, right? I'm assuming that's so she can get in a more defensive position. Would that be an example of it? And so I know in my head I know what the question is, and I can't get it out. So hopefully you just follow along, Zach.
What are you thinking? So I think what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, what is the utility of getting the hips further underneath her for the sport that she needs?
Yes.
So one example that you gave was a defensive stance. Yes. So if she's that person who, when I have the pelvis, it dumps way forward, well, that's going to limit how low she can get into the defensive stance position. And we have to ask, why is the defensive stance so useful? Well, if I get low enough, it allows me to move in multiple directions. So I've essentially pre-positioned myself to get into that level change to then explode into whatever movement I need to be able to do. That's one thing. But the other thing that's important with basketball is jumping. And in basketball, when I perform a jump, I need to be able to take advantage of the stretch shortening cycle as quickly as possible. So if I can get more vertical if I can get a more vertical pelvic positioning, that's going to help reduce the amount of time I have to take to dip down and jump up in the air to either grab a rebound or complete a layup or anything of that nature. A lot of times you can see people jump really high if they shoot their hips back and bend forward at the waist. When I was in Memphis and we did a lot of pre-draft testing where we look at people's verticals, that was the most common strategy people would use to maximize their vertical jump. But if you did that in game, you would not be successful whatsoever, right? Because someone who has a quicker ability to get up off the ground is going to beat you every time to grab the rebound or to jump, so on and so forth. So allowing her to get a more vertical pelvic orientation with some of the drills is going to help assist that. And then most importantly, when I can get my hips better underneath me, that changes the femoral positioning to a favorable advantage to encourage knee bending. So when the hips are more in an anteriorly tilted position, the femur is going to be more internally rotated. When I'm in internal rotation, if I got my foot still pointing forward, the tibia has to externally rotate. And so what that does, let me grab my son, Rufus, is that creates a twist in the knee joint. We should see this when I have knee extension, where the tibia is externally rotated and the femur is internally rotated. but I don't want to see that when the knee's bending. If I'm maintaining this position when the knee is bent, there's going to be increased compressive forces through the knee joint, which in her case is undesirable. That might limit bending excursion, that could potentially be contributing to pain, among other things. Whereas if I can get the pelvis underneath me a bit better, instead of the femur being internally rotated, I can now drive some degree of external rotation of the femur, which then again, if I'm keeping the tibia fixed forward, that's going to create a position that's more associated with bending or flexion. If the femur's E-yard and the tibia's I-yard, I now have more space in the knee joint. I get more space in the knee joint, I have less pressure at the knee joint, and I have a greater capability of creating a bend, which is going to help promote shock absorption. It's going to allow me to jump more effectively, and it's going to allow me to stay vertical enough so I can spend less time on the ground, more time in the air, more time winning games.
So that ability to, I'm assuming, drop the hips, as they say, okay,
Yes.
is so from what you just said, then it seems to be that if you're going to squat, you want to do a more Olympic style type squat where the hips are underneath you. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, they always talk about getting parallel or below parallel and things like that. What do you do with and I know this is sports specific to powerlifting, but a powerlifting squat, which is more, to varying degrees, more of a hip hinge and a lowering. Okay. Does it, if all I'm concerned with is lowering the hips to get into the jump position or a defensive position or something like that, then is one type of squat better to practice than the other? So is the Olympic squat better for that action than a powerlifting squat? Powerlifting
Absolutely.
type squat.
Yeah. I think for most athletic individuals, if you have to move in multiple directions, or you got to express force quickly, doing a more Olympic lifting style squat is way more advantageous because I need some degree of movement excursion. Whereas the powerlifting style squat that is more hingy, there's less range of motion required. And that's one reason why the wider stance is assumed. That's useful if force production is my goal because I want to minimize the amount of movement I need to be able to produce, and that helps contribute to increased stiffness in the tissues, among other things. Whereas if I'm a multi-directional athlete, or any athlete who needs to move fast, I do need more excursion available in the joints. And so in my mind, I think unless you are doing that type of sport, most individuals would overwhelmingly benefit from more vertical based squatting or Olympic style squats for that reason. And even so, I think if you are a power lifter, just from a health standpoint, because you can train in a lot of these positions, and you should, because that's going to be the way you're going to be performing these acts under competition. It still would probably be beneficial to demonstrate the other end of the spectrum, because if you're overloading these patterns again and again and again, that could potentially lead to issues. I don't want to say that it causes it, right? Because we can't say that. We don't have evidence to say that. But I do think that there is some value in being able to express other movements aside from just one dominant strategy. And, Rufus, you can attest to this when we look at young kids who play a single sport year round.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got so many of those, and it's really sad because these kids, they're 12, 16 years old, having surgeries that we would normally see people in their late 20s, early 30s having, where they're just hurting all the time, have to take time off because they're demonstrating those same patterns over and over and over again. So anytime you can expose your body to different movement behaviors that it's not normally used to or not normally in, I think that's incredibly beneficial from a health perspective.
So you're saying then a power lifter should be able at some point in time, obviously not close to a meet, but things like that, they should practice the Olympic lifts, whereas possibly a football player, basketball player should do the Olympic style lifts almost exclusively, or should they generate more force, or could I do it with a deadlift or something like that?
Well, and it depends on what the rate limiting step is for that person's ability to perform.
Yeah.
I think with Olympic style activities, and again, my bias, and that's probably because I'm not incredibly adept at coaching technique for Olympic style lifting, would be to utilize vertical based squatting and plyometrics as my one, driving more movement excursion and then increasing force production. But could you use deadlifting to do that as well from a force production standpoint? Yeah, I think you could. I would say for a power lifter, you have to ensure that you're maintaining enough available movement within your body that you stay healthy to perform a given task.
Right.
And that type of squatting that you're talking about, or does it have to be Olympic lifts? I don't know. But perhaps utilizing accessory work that is either like Olympic lifting or more vertical based squat, or that could be single leg exercises, which may actually be a little bit easier to elicit some of those positions, could be beneficial. If I'm an athlete who needs more available movement, then performing tasks where I'm staying more vertical, that could be Olympic lifts if you have enough time to teach the technique, among other things. But also too, when you are doing Olympic lifting, especially when it's heavy, there is going to be an inherent restriction in movement because your body has to generate tension to be able to move the weight. Those could be beneficial. So yeah, that would be my company line in that sense.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm going to, if I'm just I call them regular athletes, basketball, football.
Yeah.
It would seem to me that in order to be able to handle all the different things, you have to lower the hips, to change direction and things like that. Then you would want to focus on single leg movements and Olympic style squatting.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. 100%.
As opposed to a powerlifting squat. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, Rufus, for a lot of my people who I work with, which is Gen Pop athletes, a lot of trainers, I get a lot of beat up trainers and clinicians. Most of those individuals, I delay deadlifting for a while, just because, I think, and it's not that deadlifting is a bad thing. It's just that most of them are likely doing more hinge-based positioning in their programming to begin with. And it's not the most useful activity to increase available movement in the positions that they lack.
Right.
So I think, and I also think too, the way squatting has been taught over the last however long, you see people coaching these deep arches, lots of back squatting, keeping the tibia vertical. All of that's going to promote the pelvis going posteriorly. And so most folks aren't getting the exposure to that vertical displacement of pelvis that we need. So anything that we can do to increase that, their capabilities of doing that, especially because it's so important with the level changes needed to move fast, whether I'm jumping, changing direction, and things of that nature. I think most of the programming, especially in the early phases, should be geared towards that. And I would say that's especially the case if I got someone who's Gen Pop as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious. Yep.
Zach, with the vertical squat, assuming you have a good stack position, are you coaching a certain foot position to ensure you're getting the knee rotation you want as you descend down into the squat?
I'm a bit of a lazy coach. And so I feel like most of the time when I'm coaching someone, I have to focus on the pelvic and the rib cage components and make sure that they get that. And sometimes that can be overwhelming in and of itself to get on a consistent basis. So the way I circumvent coaching a specific foot position is I utilize a lot of ramping to get me where I need to go. And so when I use a ramp and the heels are elevated, that puts the foot in more of a plantar flex and inverted position. When my foot's more in that plantar flex and inverted position, that's going to promote external rotation through the extremity. When I have external rotation through the lower extremity or the legs, that helps promote the pelvic positioning that we were talking about previously with the jumping. And so if I can just ramp them and encourage them to make sure they're putting more weight on their heels than they are in the front of their foot, a lot of times that promotes the desired foot position that we need. And that's about as far as I'll take it in the beginning. If we're getting in a good spot, I don't have to coach much within the thorax and the pelvic positioning, then I might encourage a bit more outside heel contact, but making sure they're keeping the whole foot plastered. And I'd say for most people, when we're doing squat-based activities, for the bulk of their programming, I keep them on some type of ramp, just because it helps promote the adaptations that we need from a squat. And that's about as far as I take it for most people. If you don't have a ramp, Olympic lifting shoes, I think, are also great for that as well, because it promotes the same positioning.
So I take it you're not a big fan of back squat?
If I have a power lifter, I think it's essential, but I don't. For Gen Pop
or just athletes. I mean, I've pretty much gone away from the back squat, and we do a lot of goblet squat, front squat type activities.
Yeah, I'm the same. Just because if we look at the spectrum of squat versus hinge, back squat's a little bit closer towards the hinge side than anything. Right. I think there's a few issues with it for most people. One, it's really hard to get shoulders into the proper position without having issues. And two, it's very easy to lose lower rib cage positioning when you have to create that massive arch. That's going to limit vertical pelvic displacement when you have that arch. So I think you can get quite a bit of the benefits of squatting with more front-loaded variations, especially for most individuals, especially a general pop. If you can get the job done with a pistol, why would you use a bazooka?
Yeah.
And I think the pistol is a goblet squat or a zercher. I love zerchers.
Yeah.
Even front squat down the line. Most people can milk those loading wise for a long period of time, especially if they're keeping the vertical pelvic positioning. I've had some dudes who were pretty high level body composition or bodybuilding type athletes. When we can coach them into the squat position that we're talking about, absolutely crushed. Now, it could be because it's just a novel position that they're not used to. But I also think, too, if you're getting crushed with a goblet squat, making sure you're maintaining good technique, why try to use a substantial amount of load to elicit the same effect? If you can get it with a much smaller load, there's less risk involved. There's a larger ceiling because you can continue to increase the load while maintaining position.
Makes sense.
Cool. I like it. Zach, can we switch gears a bit? More of like a general question. So having worked in a bunch of different settings, has your treatment approach changed based on the setting and type of population you've worked with?
Yeah, big time. I have worked in a lot of things. And I think the most impactful for me was the first job after the MBA, which was in a small rural area in Arizona called Page America. And you might be wondering, why was it called Page America? And the reason why is because that's what the dude on the radio would call it when he would give the weather reports. We listened to on a daily basis. I heard the same songs over and over again, on and off for like 2 years, because I worked in this place on about 2 years, but it was in 2 separate occasions. And so when I worked with that population, most of the individuals were general population, deconditioned, not trained, lots overweight, lots of obesity. It was right on the Indian reservation. Unfortunately, they struggle quite a bit with that. And because of that, you go from professional basketball, where you're doing a ton of higher level exercises. You know, you're getting people to be able to do front squats. You're doing a lot of change of direction work, especially with some of the return to plays that I had to do. You're working with athletes who are really coachable for the most part. And then you get to this population where most individuals have low movement competency. They have low body awareness. And it's like, oh, shit. What am I going to do to help these people? And that was probably the best situation that could have ever happened to me, because I think a lot of the people that I struggled with at the professional level, and even before that, earlier in my career, what I missed was really honing in on the fundamentals. And for me, that was, you know, making sure that people can tuck their hips, making sure that they're getting a really good exhale at the lower rib cage to really set the basis for movement. I spent hours upon hours coaching people, doing manual interventions to get people to just do that. And by doing that alone, people would get substantial benefits. And at the same time, I was doing remote consultations, and I noticed that the people who I'd worked with remotely, which are a lot of people in the fitness industry, because they kind of want to work with me to help improve some of their movement capabilities and also understand some of the concepts I talk about on my site. But they struggle with the same thing. And we're movement professionals who have pretty good body awareness. And it was a bit of an aha moment for me, because it made me realize that, oh, no one really has these fundamentals down pat. And you'd get these individuals who had done all of these very extravagant treatments for a wide variety of pain syndromes. Perhaps they've gotten dental appliances, they've worked with an optometrist, working with these functional medicine practitioners, they're doing all of these different methods, but they couldn't get a full exhale and allow the lower rib cage to drop down. And a lot of times I'd find that, but just by working on that, we could get some substantial improvements in symptoms or performance. And that experience has carried with me to this day. I still, my job is, in a lot of sense, in the beginning, it gets kind of boring because I have to teach the same thing over and over and over again. And I find that even in higher level movements, the things that people lose are those concepts. They can't maintain lower rib cage position, and they lose pelvic positioning in a manner that would be desirable to express a given movement behavior that we want. So that experience really changed how I approach someone from a movement perspective. What I would say now, where I work at Elevate, and also too, just the clientele that I attract online, is I can take that concept much further than I was doing previously. So I wasn't doing a ton of high level plyometrics when I worked in wonderful Page America. But now that I work with a much fitter population, or I work with a lot more athletes, I have to be able to do that. I think too, because of the nature of the sports at Elevate that I work, I have to do a lot more things that involve rotation and change of direction, because I'm working with golfers, I'm working with basketball players, working with gymnasts, among other things. But regardless of what group of people you have to work with, they still need that basic movement fundamental to be superimposed on the given movement behaviors that you're trying to coach. And a lot of times, if you come back to that when you see something funky, it usually cleans things up. So the stuff that we're working on is the same. The thing that changes depending on what setting you're in is how far you have to take someone to the terminal task on one side, or how much you have to regress someone at a given movement concept to get the adaptations you want. And I would say that's been the biggest thing that's changed depending on the setting that I've worked.
So how are you, so working in where you're at now, how are you kind of weighing in terms of timeline, how much you need to prioritize these basics versus how much of the higher level stimulus you need to give these athletes who have a certain timeline of when they need to get back to their sport?
That's a great question. I'd say most of the individuals who I work with right now would be rehabbing after a substantial injury. So if they can't perform the terminal task pain-free, could be basketball, could be gymnastics, could be what have you, you might spend a larger amount of time on some of the, I don't want to say lower level tasks, but lower level tasks. But I still operate under the framework of you need to be able to produce intensity. And we're going to try to exploit that as much as we can within your given program. And in terms of timelines, if we're talking on the rehab side, it depends on what that individual can tolerate. And it doesn't mean that, okay, your form has to be 100% perfect before I progress you. But we have to ensure that you don't slide backwards as we progress you. And so if someone hits 80% of technical mastery on a given movement and it doesn't hurt, they feel okay, and they're producing an adequate amount of force, then I'm comfortable progressing them to the next phase of things. And that allows for a substantial amount of flexibility within programming. And sometimes that can progress very quickly, and sometimes it can't. So another example that I have right now is I have someone who I'm working with who he's dealing with knee issues. He's trying to be a Navy SEAL. And so if you look at the outputs that this person has to be able to do to perform that, it's a lot. And so, and we have a bit of a time crunch because there's a bit of an age thing in order to get into that field. So we kind of have a year to get this done. With him, I am pushing the envelope a bit faster, but we also have pain being a rate limiting step along the way. So in certain things, because he was dealing with a few different areas, knee pain, shoulder pain, some ab stuff, with him, shoulders are feeling great. So we can push towards higher output activities a lot faster. So now we got him, week 5 of working together, he's up to floor press. So we got a task where we are not, the emphasis isn't increase the amount of movement that's available, it's increase the ability to produce force and be able to tolerate that without pain. But from a lower body perspective, we're still struggling maintaining positioning and making sure that he can express the movements that we need without pain on, I don't want to say lower level tasks, but tasks like step ups, goblet squats, things of that nature. So in that situation, we can't, if we just kick intensity up way high, you could still have knee issues, and then that's going to be counterproductive. So you have to really utilize that person's response to determine how fast or slow you can progress. If you have someone who doesn't have pain, I think that it's very reasonable to push someone a bit farther down that path and not utilize movement competency to be perfect in order to progress that someone. But it still has to be good enough that they can perform the task with the most force production and the least amount of negative complications along the way.
Rufus and I argue about this all the time in terms of like what is good enough, because Rufus is always shooting for like an A+. And then in certain circumstances, I'm like, there's just so many things athletes need from like a quality standpoint. Like sometimes, well, I guess your opinion here, like how, like is it A minus okay if there's other things you need to kind of prioritize other than the movement competency?
Yeah, I think so. And so I'll give you an example. If we have a time crunch where, like we had someone at Elevate who's a soccer player, and because we can't change the system, training camp is always going to be just this glycolytic nightmare that has no sport specificity whatsoever. And you have to find some way to get that individual to be able to survive and tolerate that event. And so if you don't give them a little bit of the poison, they're going to croak once they get hit with the cyanide, if you know what I mean. So we have to, I think you have to respect that to some extent. But I also think too, doing as much as you can to exploit movement competency and create better movement behaviors is also advantageous. And it's just the unfortunate thing is we operate with uncertainty to how much does this person have to be able to have in order to stay healthy. And the other issue that we're not talking about is movement competency and demonstrating movement options is only one piece of the equation when it comes to health. So we can have perfect movement in the gym and we can choose all the right exercises, but if that person isn't sleeping, that we can throw the best yielding and overcoming exercises out there, but sleep has a causal role when it comes to pain. If you look at the research on it, if you look at, I think it was Brian Mann who did the study where most kids in college were more likely to sustain injuries around finals and midterms. Why? They're staying up later, they're not sleeping. So there's a lot of factors that influence someone staying healthy and performing at a high level. And I think movement competency is only one aspect of that. You have to also look at load management, which is where talking about giving someone a bit of the poison to be able to tolerate those load spikes is useful. But then I think you have to look at other factors at play as well. And are we doing things for our individuals to focus on that? That's why with a lot of my clients, almost all of them on my intake forms, I always ask about sleep, because sometimes the best thing you can do to increase their health and performance is to make sure they're getting, they're performing adequate treatments to improve that domain. So it's just like, I think we see the same thing in nutrition coaching. You can still look pretty good and be pretty healthy with a not perfect diet. The question is how perfect do you need to get in order to hit the goals that you want? And so I think 90% still an A. 80% is a B, and that's pretty good. But you just got to make sure that you're getting a B across all your classes.
Got to run that one by Rufus.
Yeah, Rufus, I don't know. What do you think, man?
Well, in my context, I want the exercise to be perfect. And my form of load management would be, if it's not perfect, then we need to regress it a little bit. And sometimes that's day to day. They come in tired, and especially with my kids, I tell them, I want the best you got for that day. And I don't really care in terms of amount of weight it is for that day. Just give me what you got. That's all I care about. And so if we have to regress it as far as the weight, or maybe change the exercise even, that's kind of how I do it. But whatever it is, I want the exercise to be perfect. And I know in a game situation, it's not going to be perfect all the time. Even in weightlifting meets, when you're going to a maximal attempt, it's not going to be perfect, you know, a lot of times. And I'm fine with that, but it's a different scenario. But in the gym, we want to strive for perfection. As Vince Lombardi used to say, knowing we're never going to attain it. And so I think the striving for the perfection is what we try to do, as opposed to it has to be perfect before you progress it. So, you know, I'll try things, you know, and it just doesn't work. Okay, fine. You know, if a kid can do a goblet squat and I want to progress him to a front squat, it doesn't look good, we can still stay with goblet squat and still do a lot of good things with it. So yeah, that's something Corey and I constantly argue about.
Well, and I would say, Rufus, I agree, and I would probably tend more towards you in that sense, because if you coach something really well and you have perfect technique, or you're getting close to that, you can still drive really good adaptations. People will get a training effect from that. And
right.
Most people who we work with don't necessarily have a major time constraint where they have to prepare themselves for something like a training camp. And so if you're not in that situation, 100%.
And I deal with middle school kids. So in my mind, I got 5 years.
Absolutely.
5 or 6 years. So, you know, if I had a soccer player, or you know, soccer player is the best example, where they only get 1 or 2 months off, then they go back training camp again, right? Yeah, things are going to change, you know, a little bit. But by the same token, you know, in my world, you know, I got hopefully 5 or 6 years with these kids, 7 years in some cases. Well, shoot, I can afford to do a lot of different things, whereas in your situation, maybe a little bit different. So that's probably the difference, because I'm looking to build them from nothing, basically, to something. Just like this little golfer I have, she's in 8th grade. I don't care how good she is right now, but we got to fix these things, you know, now, and I can take a longer time to fix it, or spend more time trying to fix it, because whether she wins, you know, a big tournament or not, in the scheme of things, it's not that important. How good are you when you're, you know, 4 or 5 years down the road a little bit, in my case. So
Yeah, that's the ideal situation. Do you ever run into parents who want the win now approach for the 8th grader?
All the time, you know, I get, you know, I just, it's funny you mentioned that. I got an email the other day from a parent that, you know, her son's not lifting heavy enough. Doesn't feel like he's lifting heavy enough. Well, he crashes down at the bottom of a squat. You know, he goes down and he can't control it, right? And he crashes down at the bottom of the squat. So I take the weight out of his hand, you know, and so it's not, you know, I don't know why that is, because there's some days he can, some days he can't. And the days he can, I let him go, you know. And so she took him out of the program, you know, put him in another program. And you know, it's amazing in weightlifting, or in the Eastern European countries, if you read the old Russian weightlifting manuals, they weren't allowed to go more than 50% of their body weight in snatch and 100% of their body weight in clean and jerk. So they're like 14 years old for the first 2 years, right? It's amazing how strong those kids get, you know, with that, you know. But that was the time to perfect the technique of the lift, you know, and stuff, build these other qualities. And you know, it's funny you mentioned like unilateral squatting. So they you know, they have all these percentages. You do this much percent clean and jerk, and you know, this much percent squatting. Well, in the squats, 28% of your exercises should be squatting exercises. But 15% of those should be single leg unilateral squatting exercises. So the majority of the things you do are unilateral things like that, you know. And but I never had it in weightlifting so much, because I think it's because parents don't know anything about the sport of weightlifting, so they don't say much to me about it. But you know, it's these other people. He's got to. What's the first thing they tell you when he comes in? He's got to get stronger. You know,
Yeah.
and you know, Corey and I talk about this all the time. Strength is not the only factor. Maximal strength is not the only factor in sport, right? You got to be able to move. You got to be able to rotate in some cases and things like that. And you know, and so but the only thing they know is strength. That's the only thing they talk about. You never hear about, oh, he's got to be able to rotate, you know, unless you're talking to yourself or Lee Taff or Bill Hartman, Ty Terrell's, you know, people like that. Well, yeah, you're going to get that. But with most of the people, it's, you know, you got to get stronger. And so you know, I've had them get mad at me because we went out and played tag. I had 95 kids show up one day for opening day of training, right? I had 95 kids showed up. I lost half of them the first day because we played tag.
Wow.
And I couldn't get the parents to understand that, you know, it's conditioning. It's just like what, you know, and they're mostly football players. It's like football, because what's football? It's tag and escape, right? And so I lost half of them in one day because we played 10 minutes of tag. And I kept losing them because we played the last 10 minutes were spent playing tag. And for an hour and a half, the last 10 minutes is tag. And, you know, so I think it's more of, you have most people, all they talk about is the strength and quote numbers, you know, but you ask them, okay, give me a number you want your kid to squat to be a great offensive lineman. Well, I don't know. Exactly. You can't tell me.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like I used to work with a lot of baseball players, and I tell them Sammy Sosa can't clean and jerk his body weight, but yet he hit 70 home runs. You know, so you can tell how long ago this was. You know, that was 20 years ago or whatever it was. And, you know, it's always been like that. You got to be able to do these other things to, you know, improve your sport. But they only think in terms of strength and numbers. How much weight can I lift? So that's kind of the big battle that you fight. And, you know, there's still a lot of coaches, you know, in college and high school, it's a number, you know, and every coach I talk to, I tell them, take the record board down, because it doesn't mean anything. You know, if you can't play, you know, if strength were the only factor or a number, powerlifters and world's strongest men be the world's greatest athletes. You ever seen one of them run? They don't run too good.
No. Benedict Magnuson could jump pretty well, though.
Well, that's true, but can he, but here's the point, though. But can he change direction?
No. Yeah. No, I'm with you.
You know, so what good is he? I got a great vertical jump, but I can't change direction. Well,
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
The unfortunate thing is that is the number is it's easier to show progress that way than it is to show the squat was better.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, the unfortunate thing is you can get the number to change and not necessarily have the technical pieces there. It's not like if you were learning a musical instrument, you know, mom and dad can complain that Joey still can't play Stairway to Heaven on the guitar, but it's on Joey because he can't hit the chords right.
Yeah.
He can't get his hands into the positions. And I mean, that's the nice thing about musical instruments is they're self-limiting in that sense. And you're not only going to get the output you want if you have the technical components down pat. The downside that we have as movement professionals is you can get the outputs in a wide variety of ways, but they can come at a cost, and they might not necessarily be able to get those in the most technically efficient or useful manner. And then it's the question of how relevant is that to the terminal task that they want to do. And, you know, to echo what you said, Rufus, strength is only one component of athleticism that's needed for a sport.
Yeah, you know, unless you're a power lifter, you know, or even in weightlifting, you know, it's not always the maximally stronger guy that wins, although you got to be really strong, but you also got to be able to move really fast. You know, you have the right muscle fiber, right? And so, you know, I never worried how much they were squatting, as long as they could stand up out of a clean and a snatch. What do I care what they squat?
Yeah.
You know? Well, you know, they asked me, can we test our back squat today? Why? You know, so one of the greatest lifters ever, Yuri Vardanyan, told me that he never squatted more than he could clean and jerk, never front squatted more than he could clean and jerk. But he could always stand up with a lift. You know, Alexeyev was the same way. You know, they say he never went over 280 kilos. Well, he couldn't clean and jerk 280 kilos. Why waste the effort to go over 280 kilos? Or, you know, to go to 320 or 350, which he probably could have done. You know, but why waste the effort? You know, it's all like you were saying, it's kind of God dang it, minimalist. It's not a perfect podcast like yours, okay?
Oh, mine's far from perfect.
So,
although it's because I edit it heavily afterwards. Get rid of all the ums and the clicks and all the other crap I do that embarrasses probably only me.
Yeah, so, you know, but it's, you know, it's kind of the same thing. You know, why am I going to waste my time to have a football player squat 700 pounds when, you know, does he really need that? I'd rather spend the time, you know, let's say we get his hips fixed so that he can rotate and, you know, change direction, you know, and things like that, or work on his speed. I mean, it's all combined, and that's what I think most people don't realize. They just think strength equals faster speed. Not necessarily.
Yeah, or bigger muscles.
Yeah. So that's just how I think about it. So
yeah, we need to do a better job as professionals educating the general public on that. I think, but it's hard. It's hard because I think the pressure is there for kids, you know, especially with just rising costs of education, things of that nature. I mean, I have so many kids right now where I'm doing sport X so I can go to college. Yeah. Because it's the only way my family will likely be able to afford me going to a specific college. And, or, you know, I need to go play pro basketball. And so at 16, I have to play year round in order to make this happen. But the unfortunate thing that I think a lot of parents don't recognize is most of the top athletes in any sport played many sports, and they're there because, well, one, they're there because they're genetic freaks.
Right.
But they can also express athleticism in a wide variety of environments. And that's what makes them successful. That's why, you know, James Harden, I mean, he's not the most athletic person, but he's going to hit the step back three in every potential environment and situation in the game that he possibly can. Mm-hmm. And that's because he's a very good athlete, and he's he's been able to solve that problem in a wide variety of situations. And really, I think high-level athleticism is problem solving. And so if you have the concept of problem solving with your body in a wide variety of situations, that's only going to make you better at whatever your goal task is. And it's just unfortunate because we don't emphasize that with young kids.
Well, Corey and I have talked about this. I don't think they're exposed to enough variety of sports to get a feel for what they could be, good at. When I first got into weightlifting, I kind of, they taught me how to look at it a little bit differently, right? And I even asked, should they just be doing weightlifting? And they said, no, you have to develop the athlete first. And if you look at, the old Russian manuals where the training programs are in there, it's the first 2 years is about 80% what they would call GPP, general physical preparation, right? And it doesn't change until they get to a very high level, master of sport or candidate for master of sport, to where that percentage flips. It's about 80-20 in the beginning, about 20-80 in the much later stages. But that's 6, 7, 8 years down the road. So they I remember Dragomir Charoslan, he and I would have these conversations. He used to be the national coach for USA Weightlifting, grew up in Romania. And he said, by the time I was 15 years old, he said, I knew how to play 15 different sports. How many of our kids can do that? I got soccer players can't throw a ball and baseball players can't kick a soccer ball properly.
And none of them can skip.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the other thing we found out, that they can't jump rope either.
Really?
And, oh, my gosh. And I've got a new group just started a couple of weeks ago, about 30 kids. And it's the most kids that came in knowing how to jump rope than I've ever had before. And so
why do you think that is? That's surprising.
Well, because they don't have recess. I mean, now I'm obviously I'm a lot older than you two guys, but when I came up, everybody jumped rope. So the girls always did, where they get on each end and swing it, and they'd have little songs they would jump to, and stuff. Well, the boys, when I was coming up, you go to ask the coach, the football coach, what do I need to do to get faster? And the first thing he'd tell you was jump rope.
Yeah.
So we grew up jumping rope, right? And so, whoops, sorry about that. We grew up jumping rope, and therefore, we have a little bit of rhythm, a little bit of timing, and things like that. So what I have to do now is I have to put them on a metronome, jump to the metronome, and for some reason, I don't know why this is, you can probably tell me, but they seem to pick it up much faster when they have a beat that they go to. So that, I hate music in the weight room. Okay. I think, they say, oh, it motivates them. Well, if you need music to motivate you, you shouldn't be in the weight room or should be playing at all, because you should be internally motivated, right? So, but what I found was that the kids pick up how to jump rope much faster if I put them on a beat to the metronome. And that's one time I'll play music is when we're jumping rope. You got to stay with the beat of the music. Now I can't hear the beat, so I have a girl in there, or one of the boys that can. So just follow him, And so they try to keep up, and so we do it at varying speeds, varying beats, and things like that. So I started kind of messing with, okay, I'm teaching them how to do a split squat. Let's put them to the beat of the split squat, and we'll vary it a little bit. And it seems like I don't know if these kids are just better, or what the deal is. But it seems like they picked up, how to get their hips centered, and everything much better when we put the metronome on it. And so, I think, that, they miss out on a lot of that rhythm that they learn, from doing that. So it's astounding how many kids can't jump rope. How many kids can't army crawl? I was at, I went to Paris Island Marine Recruit Depot. I had a chance to go down there, and I was with a very highly decorated Marine, and he was giving a talk there. So they took us behind the scenes where you normally wouldn't be allowed. And so we saw them crawling under the barbed wire with their M16s, right? And it was a group of girls, and I'd say 60% of them can't army crawl and keep the sand out of the rifle barrel.
Wow.
They'd get through it finally, and then you'd see them stand up, and all the sand would come out of the rifle barrel. It was unbelievable. And so they would, take them across, or not take them across, but take them off the side. They'd spend time teach them individually how to army crawl. Why do they have cadences when they're marching or running in the military? Just keep to a beat, right?
Yeah.
And,
yeah. Well, you recruit another sense to help you perform the movement.
Yeah. I don't think that, we're so, I have this argument with my son-in-law all the time. My grandson plays basketball, and they're so focused on running set of plays, that they never learn to get into a flow. They don't learn to think. This guy does this, you move over here. The big guys. I had a 12-year-old come to me one time. He was like 5'10", weighed 250 pounds, 255, and he's a fat kid. And so he came in with an AAU basketball T-shirt on the first day, and I said, "Oh, you play basketball?" I said, "Yeah, I used to." I said, "Why don't you now?" And he said, "It's not any fun." Oh, okay. Let me describe your basketball experience. He goes, "You go down, get the rebound, outlet the ball to the guard. They don't care if your fat ass ever gets down the court or not, do they?" How'd you know? I said, "Because that's what they do with all fat kids." Well, it turns out the kid's really athletic. He's the easiest kid I ever taught how to do the Olympic lifts. He picked it up faster than any kid I've ever had. We put him on I put him in a basketball league where they made him run up and down the floor, and they made him bring the ball up. Shooting out, he wasn't NBA material, okay, but he could do it. He came in one day and he said, "Guess what I did today?" I said, "What?" He said, I got the rebound, led the fast break, dribbled down the floor, went behind my back and laid it up."
Wow.
Just looked at him. I said, "You got to be kidding me." The kid went on, got a football scholarship to University of Louisville when they were good a number of years ago. But if we don't give him the opportunity, how do we know he's a good athlete?
Yeah.
And so I think we pigeonhole him. We pigeonhole him into sport, and then we don't coach the ones that are less athletic, or that we perceive to be less athletic. Sorry about the rant.
No, it's good. Well, I don't even think about, with basketball, I was this tall. I'm like 6'2" or whatever in 7th grade.
Yep.
Yeah. And basketball was my sport, but I was a center. Yeah. And I remember I dribbled behind my back in the backcourt. No one was around me, and I got taken out.
Yeah.
And But when I got to high school, everyone shot up.
Yep.
And then I couldn't compete anymore because I didn't have other skills.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because I think, and this is tough because it's like we prioritize winning and success very early on as opposed to exploration and play.
Yep.
But at the same time too, how do you balance that with also teaching kids that life's not always fair and you're not going to win it and be successful at everything? And I think that's a dichotomy within that.
That's where you as a coach come in, and also I think that this is where they don't get exposed to a wide variety of sports. I didn't know about ultimate frisbee until I saw a bunch of kids outside playing one day. And I'm looking at it and I thought, God, they run up and down, they're moving, they got to change direction, do all this stuff. And I asked one of the kids, what are you playing out there? And they said, ultimate frisbee. Oh, really? Oh. Well, then I figured out, guess what? I can shorten the field to get one adaptation. I can lengthen the field to get another adaptation, right? And so for our general conditioning, go out and play frisbee. As long as you're running hard and running up and down the thing, go play frisbee. And the kids loved it. I didn't have any problem getting them to run. And so, that was kind of what I was wanting to do, was to move. And so, that didn't take any genius on my part, just, looking at it and figuring it out. Gee, they like doing this. They don't know they're running and they're getting some conditioning, basically, some change of direction, different things and stuff like that. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Corey. I know you're Corey's after me. Shut up, Rufus. That's why I can't see him. That's why I can't see him on the screen. I turned him off so I don't see him on the screen.
No, this is great.
Yeah.
The most excited I've seen you on one of these, Rufus.
Oh, God, this is really good.
Well, the best game though. The best game is spike ball. That's my jam.
Well, there's another one.
Love spike ball.
When I was at iFest, we used to play for hours.
Yeah,
we're starting to close.
Yep. Yeah, we play. Me and my coworkers play every Thursday now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a blast. It's a blast.
Well, it's funny because you'll watch kids play for the first time and they'll just kind of stand there and not move with the ball. And then they play a couple of times, they get used to it. All of a sudden they're reading other players, reading the ball. And it's these are just skills you pick up from playing these games that now apply to whatever kind of sport you want to go into later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
So you got any other questions, Corey? That was a stupid question, I know.
Yeah, one final question to wrap up here.
Perfect.
Zach.
Perfect.
So you're really good at taking really complex ideas and simplifying it in teaching. Do you have a certain process you go about in terms of obtaining new information, trying to simplify it down, and then figuring out a way to make it digestible for a large audience?
Yes. So in the early phases of my career, it was a big accumulation block. I need everything I possibly can because I need to ensure that I succeed with as many people as possible. So what I did in the beginning of my career was I tried to learn everything I possibly could. I spent so much money on seminars, books, all that. And then what I would do is I would read or take the course. I would basically rewrite my notes in a manner that was understandable to me. And then I would go and teach it, whether it's through a blog or anything like that. And that was how I got developed the initial understanding of a given topic. But what I think really helped me the most, because there's some things that I retained way better than other things that I had learned. And so I kind of reflected back a few years ago and I asked, well, why is this? And the big key was applying it in some way, shape, or form. So I remember I had gotten a deviated septum fixed, and I was still coming out of anesthesia, and my friend was there, and she was asking me, how's your nose feel? And out of anesthesia, I was going into, oh, I'm okay, I feel good right now, but I'm not concerned that's going to hurt much because I know so much about pain. It's it's a product of the brain. It doesn't necessarily deal with tissue damage. And I went on this like 2-minute lecture. She's got a video of it, of me talking about pain and things of that nature. And the reason why I was able to recall that automatically, and I still probably can to this day, is because I spent years working with clients and telling them, teaching them about how pain works. Because a lot of people have maladaptive beliefs surrounding pain, and that can be a rate limiting step to their recovery. And it was the application piece that I think is most useful. And so where I'm at now in terms of when I go seek information of any kind is to make it relevant and meaningful and useful. I have to have an immediate problem that I need solving right in front of me. And most of my inspiration comes from patients or clients. So I have a problem. I don't know what to do. How can I maximize this person to help solve that problem? And so with that problem in mind, I might go research a topic, and it could be reading a book. It could be research. It could be watching a YouTube video. It could be anything. I try to conceptualize how it would make sense in my head. So that could be writing notes of the very same process that I used before. But then the most important thing is I go apply it somehow, see if it works, see what doesn't work. And then once I have that information, then it's a matter of teaching it so I can reinforce it. And I just create this endless loop. And I try to do that with everything I learn. So another area that I enjoy learning about is just human interaction. And so if I need to create better buy-in with a given thing, or if it's marketing some of my stuff, it's the same thing. I struggle relating to this type of client. Read this concept, try to have a conversation with that person, then go teach. And you just create that endless cycle over and over and over again. And I think you could do that with anything. If you're new to investing, as an example, learn about investing, go put some money into a stock or crypto or whatever the hell you want to do, see how you respond, see where the struggles are, try to teach it to, and it doesn't have to be you post stuff online. It could be that you have a conversation with a friend trying to explain the concept, and you just keep doing that over and over and over again. And to me, that's what has helped skyrocket my learning in a wide variety of areas. I think where people struggle with learning any type of thing is, instead of having an immediate problem that they need to solve, they read a specific book to keep up with the Joneses. And in our field, that is something that goes in cycles. In 2013, it was polyvagal theory. Everyone was reading that, but what the hell is the application of that? You don't have anything to measure heart rate variability. Or people read Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. Okay, cool. Read the first chapter and then you're done. Or it's Behave by Robert Sapolsky. And in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, he talks about this girl named Katie Sierra who talks about just-in-case learning versus just-in-time learning. I think a lot of people spend time reading things just in case. I might need this at some point, but then if you don't apply it to something meaningful in the immediate, it will go in one ear and out the other. Whereas if you do just-in-time learning, I need to figure out how to deal with X. There's a time constraint. I'm going to spend some time researching that. It becomes much more meaningful. It's more likely to stick. And you're better able to find how it's useful versus not. And I think that's the component that a lot of people miss, is they don't learn the right things at the right time, and then they don't apply them, and then they don't teach them. So I'm a big fan of making sure you're applying, but you're also teaching. I remember Bill taught me when I was a student about watch one, learn one, teach one. And I think he does a great job of doing this with his interns. Is you watch him do something, and then you do that with the client, and then you teach the other interns how to do that or about that specific topic. And I think with my blog, that was the initial process, is I didn't have Bill to force me to teach the concepts to someone. And that's how it really started. And that's what I use it for now. But the problems I solve are either problems that I have or that a client has, or someone, one of the fam has, and I try to go and solve that for them. And that's really how the process works.
I love that. And also just takes the burden off you to need to know everything immediately, as opposed to like what is going to be relevant for you now. So I really like that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to know, but to be everywhere is to be nowhere. So you have to be very focused with your learning. And then you don't have to spend, you might not necessarily have to spend a lot of time reading. You just got to read the right things at the right time.
Yeah, I like it. Cool. Well, Zach, thank you for coming on. I don't think we've told you this yet, but every guest who comes on gets a free Smoothies with Rufus t-shirt.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I can't pay you. So
oh my God. I'm so excited about that. Yeah.
So we've got
I can't wait to rock it.
Yeah, we've got an order processing right now. It should be ready pretty soon, right, Rufus?
Yep. What size do you wear?
I'm a medium now. I leaned out a little bit.
Medium? Oh, he's medium. Yeah. He's telling me to get all these mediums. I go, nobody wears a medium. He goes, well, I do. I said, yeah, but you're skinny. I'm used to guys with XL, double XL, triple XL, you know.
Yeah. Well, I was large for a while, but I decided I need to drop some weight, and so now I'm a medium.
Okay.
I intend on staying a medium, so I'm honored. I look forward to wearing the shirt and dropping a give it a shot with that shirt on there.
Ooh, there you go. I love that. Hey, Zach, one last thing. Tell us where people can find you. I guess that's how you say it. I don't know what they say.
That is what people say. The home base is zaccupples.com. That's ZACCUPPLES.com. There I have access to tons of blogs, my show, the Zac Cupples Show, the Movement Debrief. You can subscribe to my newsletter. I offer a free course on there if you're interested in some of the movement concepts that we talked about today, but the terminology is a little over the head. That foundations course is free and is a great way to enhance your learning in that sense. And then on there, I also offer a lot of services. You can work with me remotely if you're struggling with movement limitations, you need some help, or if you want to do online training, or if you want to learn how to apply some of these concepts with your peeps, I do mentorship as well. And then, of course, there's my seminar, Human Matrix, where we go into what are the movement fundamentals, the movement principles that are applicable to just about any movement strategy, and most importantly, how to coach them, because I think you need the practical application to be successful. I'm also on social media. Facebook is /Z Cupples. Twitter is @Z Cupples. Instagram is Zac, Z-A-C Cupples, C-U-P-P-L-E-S. And the last place you can find me is on YouTube. If you search Zac Cupples, I got a gang, exercises, content. That's awesome.